Bonjour. Donc, on est revenu sur Hollandinum et sur cette série de débats sur les débats. Et j'essaye tout simplement de mettre, on a un peu perdu la main, mais je pense qu'on pourra déjà commencer. Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Je suis vraiment ravie de relancer ce séminaire. Euh, le- la série, le cycle de séminaires sur les débats sur le débat. Aujourd'hui, nous avons le plaisir de relancer ce cycle en accueillant une chercheuse et deux chercheurs italiens qui travaillent respectivement Viviana Massi à l'Université Roma 3, Davide Garassino à l'Université des sciences appliquées de Zurich et Nicola Brocca à l'Institut de didactique de l'Université de Innsbruck. Donc, soyez déjà les bienvenus tous les trois. Nicola, Viviana et Davide travaillent ensemble depuis plusieurs années sur des questions liées à l'implicite. Ils ont commencé à travailler en examinant, en analysant le discours, l'implicite dans le discours des personnalités politiques sur Twitter. Ils ont travaillé sur la possibilité de mesurer la communication implicite. Plus récemment, ils se sont focalisés sur l'enseignement de l'implicite. Je suis contente aujourd'hui d'accueillir aussi Edoardo Lombardi-Vallauri, que je salue. Eduardo, pendant quelques années, a travaillé avec nous à Hollandinum et il est le fondateur et il anime toujours l'Observatoire de la permanent de la publicité et de la propagande, avec lequel Davide, et Nicola et Viviana ont aussi longtemps collaboré. Alors, on va faire une présentation un petit peu plus détaillée de Viviana, qui est une chercheuse en linguistique au département de langue, littérature et culture étrangère de l'Université Roma 3. Ses recherches en pragmatique se focalisent notamment sur les bases neurophysiologiques des structures implicites. Elle a collaboré, je vous l'ai dit, avec l'Observatoire OPPP et de Roma 3. Elle est responsable de la réalisation des expériences neurolinguistiques menées dans le cadre du projet IMPAX et elle est l'auteur de deux monographies publiées par John Benjamin, de Social Biological Basis of Information Structure and the Manipulative Disguise of Truth. Bienvenue, Viviana. Et merci d'avoir accepté mon invitation. Davide Garassino enseigne, je vous l'ai dit, à l'Université des sciences appliquées de Zurich. Ses principaux domaines d'études comprennent la structure de l'information, la prosodie et la linguistique des corpus. Et depuis quelques années, il s'intéresse également aux aspects pragmatiques de la communication politique avec une attention particulière pour l'implicite. Nicolas Brocca Nicole Brocca est chercheur postdoctoral à l'Institut de didactique de l'Université d'Innsbruck. Il travaille sur les stratégies d'enseignement visant à développer la culture numérique. Aujourd'hui, on va cibler ce point en particulier. Développer la culture numérique dans le milieu scolaire et universitaire. Il s'intéresse notamment à l'enseignement des langues par l'analyse textuelle des médias sociaux et à la sensibilisation au contenu implicite des textes persuasifs. Donc, j'ai lancé ce séminaire comme la tradition le demandait en français. Et j'invite les personnes qui sont connectées, que ce soit sur Zoom ou sur Facebook, s'ils le souhaitent, à poser des questions, que ce soit en français, en anglais ou en italien. Mais le séminaire aujourd'hui se déroulera en anglais. Ça nous permettra d'avoir, je pense, une langue commune à toutes et à tous. Et voilà, donc si vous me le permettez, je passe à présenter, euh, à lancer cette conversation en anglais. So, uh, let me spend just a few words about Olindinom, l'Observatoire linguistique du discours numérique. Why did we decide to launch this observatory a few years ago? Our idea was exactly to try to rediscover and to update a theoretical pedagogical framework. What was called in the 70s in Italy la educazione linguistica democratica, that we could translate democratic linguistic education, or maybe more exactly linguistic education for democracy. This framework was proposed by Tullio De Mauro and the GISHL, the group of interventions and study in linguistic education in the 70s. The idea behind this framework was that in order to have a full participation in the democratic life of a country, of a community more in general, citizens must be aware of the complexity of discourse. What does it mean? Complexity of discourse means that people must be aware not only of what are the grammatically acceptable or non-acceptable structures of a language, but more generally and more profoundly, more deeply, they should be fully aware of the cultural framework in which discourse is organized and of the power relations that permeate discourse. They should be aware of the impact that the semiotic condition of productions and reception have on the effectiveness, on the utility, on the usability of discourse. They should be aware of the repertoire of available discourse options and their social linguistic relevance. And they also should be aware of the rhetorical strategies available to speakers. What does it mean that we want to update this framework? We need to take into account the fact that both the public discourse and the private discussion shifted in the last few years on social networks and more in general on the internet, with an impact on the way we speak. So critical digital literacy is becoming, as you mentioned in one of your most recent articles, increasingly important for education and intellectual development. So, can we start by clarifying some terms? First of all, what is exactly critical digital literacy, and what place does linguistic democratic education have in this framework, in the framework of critical digital literacy? I don't know who wants to.
I would like to start this question. Thank you very much. So, critical digital literacy as a definition born some years ago. There was wait a moment, an essay written in 2007, who said that critical literacy is not an option anymore. And the authors refer to what you said, indeed, Paula. So the awareness of power relation in the online discourse. So also considering that there are oligopole of power who determine which information are online and not. In our exception, in our definition where we use, we develop this point of view, and we also develop the ability we add also the ability of the reader to understand the implicit meaning that is conveyed by a message. So, which for our definition of literacy is very important. I forgot now the second point you would like to speak about.
I had asked, I don't know if you thought about it, but what is the place that specific linguistic education takes in the framework of the critical digital literacy?
Mm-hmm.
Or the other way around, if you want.
Mm-hmm. So we, of course, digital literacy has is a diagonal competence that need sociological competence, but we think that linguistic can also provide a lot to develop digital literacy because of studies about persuasion. So language is used commonly to persuade, but the way how today some information is transmitted is very different than it was with the traditional mass media 10, 20 years ago. The traditional media like television, radio, or newspapers were mediated and were also by an expert like a journalist, and also were consummated with not such isolated as social media now today are consumed. Also the responsibility that reader or social media have now are different because they can easily share, like, and generate data about this message, and they support this message with the actions. So they are really, they have need to have more competencies that before were mediated by other actors like journalists or the newspaper writers and so on. And this competence need to be transmitted with a new education, like, for example, some strategies. Many scholars have proposed strategies in the last decades. One more popular strategy is the fact-checking, which is realized, for example, with a lateral reading. So not just read a web page from top to the bottom, but read and check for information lateral using other websites. Or, for example, inoculation. So show to students a fake news, demonstrated as fake news in order that they can recognize fake news when they meet in a natural environment. Or critical ignoring, so try to nudge themselves to pay attention really in a website or people that really dare our attention. And finally, what we proposed in our recent article in language teacher education is the implicit content extraction. So this ICA, implicit content extraction, addresses the challenge of implicit content by making this content explicit in order to be able to discuss them and to challenge the truth of this message.
Okay, thank you very much. So, since you are talking about implicit, once again, can we provide a scientific definition of what implicit is? What types of implicit communication are there? And is implicit always manipulative? Is manipulative discourse always implicit? And why did you decide to focus on implicit? Is it so important to study this implicit communication to create critical digital awareness? So,
maybe I can answer this question if Nicola and Davide agree. Well, okay. First of all, it must be said that implicitness has received manifold definitions, but in general, and also dependent on the strategies through which it is normally conveyed. But we could call implicit communication any type of strategy that is devoted to indirectly convey meanings. To date, also thanks to the works by Eduardo, we know that implicitness can operate at different levels of a message. So there is a level which we can refer to as content or propositional, whenever we conceal or hide. So the main propositional content that more often than not corresponds with the real intentional meaning of the speaker. Or it can affect what we can call the speaker's responsibility for the truth of some information. So we can either hide the content or the responsibility. Trying to discern or decide which of the two types of implicitness is more harmful and dangerous is a daunting task, because obviously, in a way, whenever you leave some content implicit that is known available at the surface level, you let the addressee take part in the inferential process of recovering that meaning, and this defers the responsibility on the receiver himself. When you conceal responsibility, what you're actually doing is to try to conceal your epistemic commitment to ascertain something, to provide evidence for the truth of something. And in some cases, this may turn out to be even more dangerous to understand, to recover, to detect, because it very often exploits strategies that normally bypass the receiver's critical attention. And this is, for example, what happens with presuppositions. So what linguistic means can we use to convey contents implicitly? Obviously, so the taxonomy is very rich, but the most common ones, and at least as far as our studies have revealed so far, the most influencing in terms of cognitive processes, so how they can distort reality, how they can distort the processing of a message, are implicatures, presuppositions, vague expressions, and in some cases, different patterns of information structure. Implicatures, as probably most of you know, are intentional meanings which are not expressed on the surface structure, but can be inferred via inferential processes, via mechanisms of understanding which maxims are violated, so which communicative behavior, expected communicative behaviors are violated. Presuppositions generally refer to contents that we take for granted in communication. And they're usually conveyed through structures like definite descriptions. The black cat has crossed the street, for example, which presupposes the existence of a referent. or even subordinate clauses, like when she left for Paris, so she broke up with a boyfriend and something like that, that presupposes that she left Paris. So we have specific types of constructions known as presupposition triggers that convey the instruction of treating some information as already known, already part of the common ground. In general, what some experimental studies have interestingly revealed is that all these discourse strategies somehow impact the way we process sentences and, more in general, discourse, the discourse dimension. With presupposition, particularly, what happens is that we tend to devote less cognitive resources to contents that are usually presupposed because we consider them to be already part of our background knowledge. And so they do not fulfill the speaker's communicative purpose. That's why they don't deserve too much attention. Implicatures have been studied in different ways, but more or less also so implicatures instruct to a different type of process that is, so as I was saying, inferential. So they usually require the receiver to make an extra effort to calculate what the speaker intends to say. And this is not always successful in that it is always so trying to compute, to guess what implicature has to be recovered is a risky guess, I would say, because obviously it's the context itself. So the amount of information that is shared, that should be properly used in order to reconstruct the exact implied meaning. So obviously, it is easy to imagine how manipulative these strategies can be, just to come to the second part of your question, Paola. But it is also important to discern between uses of implicit communication, which are, I would say, semiotic in nature, in the sense that we, in some cases, try to reduce the cognitive apparatus of the language. We try not to assert a new contents which are already known. And so presupposition has also an anaphorical function of resuming some information already introduced in the universe of discourse. But depending on the text type, and I would say also depending on the type of content that they package, they can be manipulative. That's why, so in most of our researches, we have focused on content types which it may be more or less challengeable. Obviously, when some presupposition conveys content that is already known, it is not manipulative whatsoever. But if it conveys an opinion, if it conveys an attack, that should be explicitly asserted. In that case, there is an abuse of the presupposition, because some content that should be presented to the receiver's critical attention is instead put in the background, and the speaker does not show responsibility for that content. So he does not endorse the truth of that content publicly. So this is the case in which they can become manipulative, and this is also the linguistic core that should be probably the bulk of a didactic program to train not just students, but people in general, to detect this potentially distorting discourse strategies in any type of text, because only by doing this, only by navigating these traps, is it possible to disclose the truth.
Can I add an example to that, Paola?
Yeah, of course you can.
So just take the slogan everyone knows, "Make America Great Again." So this again presupposes that in this moment, American is not great, it's not fit enough, but it was previously much better. However, if I transmit this information explicitly, clearly it is very boring and too long, and also it's more challengeable because someone can say, okay, which time are you really comparing? How was the employment rate in the 70s and now? How was the social security in the GPL in this country and so on? So making this message implicit is much more effective indeed. And what we would like to teach is that normally in school, students are trained in an epistemically safe environment. But in the real life, no. So they have be aware that some information they get in the daily life can also looks like different that they are.
Okay, thank you. That we will go back to this point concerning the teaching of implicitness in a moment. But I would like to ask you a question, going back to the title of one of your recent articles about the measurability of implicit. Can we quantify the implicitness of a discourse and its abuse, if you want?
Yeah, this is a very interesting, important question. Well, I think that implicit communication is measurable, well, at least to some extent, but it remains challenging. It's very important to understand why and how it is so challenging. A possible answer is that this challenge is somehow inherent in the discipline, so in empirical or corpus-based pragmatics. As we know, pragmatics is all about speaker's meaning. And to quote Tom Scott Phillips in a 2017 paper, there is no obvious way to measure speaker meaning, unlike the objects studied in other linguistic domains, such as phonetics and phonology, which deal with directly observable physical phenomena. So think, for instance, of vowel and consonant durations. In light of the struggle, Viviana, Nicola, and I have been trying to develop a reliable annotation procedure specifically for presupposition and vagueness. So our goal is basically to develop annotation categories and procedures that can guarantee a satisfactory level of reliability and reproducibility. So our most effective approach so far involves, I would say, 4 key elements. So first, a coding book with detailed instructions and annotated examples of potentially manipulative presuppositions and vagueness, for instance. Second, the presence of expert annotators who are very familiar with pragmatic theories and with the identification of presupposition and vagueness in texts. So far, our annotation have been developed mostly by Viviana and myself. And as a third key element, I would also add regular consensus building meetings, which is considered best practice in applied linguistics. So regular discussions between annotators help ensure agreement on difficult cases within a data set. So just to give you a more concrete examples, typically Viviana and I have a first meeting devoted to the selection of examples of presuppositions and vagueness phenomena that we both consider as potentially manipulative. A second meeting follows a formal inter-rater agreement analysis of our independent annotations. So, for instance, the annotation of concerning the discourse functions of presuppositions. And in this second meeting, we discuss disagreement cases and we try to reach a compromise. Finally, I would also mention as the fourth key element, the choice of proper inter-rater agreement indices that can also play an important role with corpus data and specifically with corpus pragmatic data. However, this is a very technical aspect and I prefer just to leave it aside for the moment and for this discussion. So all in all, this procedure has yielded more than decent inter-rater reliability values in the last couple of years. However, it's also important to mention the cost of such procedure, as you've probably already figured out while I was outlining briefly this procedure. It's very time-consuming, and maybe more important, it does not seem easily replicable by non-experts. So, for instance, by undergraduate students. This is an aspect that I would like just to explore more in the near future, for instance, by providing very detailed coding book instructions to undergraduate students and then to see how the results may look like. But for the time being, I think that we have to accept this compromise for measuring implicit communication.
This is very interesting, and I will go back to this point when we will talk about the teaching of implicit. Exactly. But let me just highlight the fact that much in line with the work that we are doing at the Olandinoma, you focused on social media and in particular on Twitter. Can you just tell us why? Why did you decide to focus on social media?
Yeah, maybe I can also say something about that, about this this choice. Well, I can say that by the time we started working on this, it was about 2015. Twitter, which is now known as X, had already become very popular among politicians worldwide. This trend was somehow foreshadowed, anticipated by the first presidential campaign of Barack Obama in 2008, but then it became really, really widespread. And we also observed, and it was about 2014, that there was an increase in traditional media citing of tweets and the rapid integration into public discourse in Italy at the time. And that coincided more or less with Matteo Renzi being prime minister at the time, and he was a very active user of Twitter. So, in order to answer your question, I would say that the first reason that drew our attention to Twitter was the popularity. Was basically its popularity among politicians, but it is only part of the story. There were also more theoretical considerations. So at the time, if you remember, Twitter had a very specific character limit. In the beginning, 140 characters, and then starting from 2017, 218. So we just hypothesized that this brevity constraint, together with the lack of a proper context, might have forced politicians and more generally users of this platform to rely as much as possible on implicit meaning as a natural way of communicating more than what was explicitly said. So in other words, social media, but Especially Twitter seem like the ideal place for our digital fieldwork on implicit communication. And this hypothesized quantitative relevance of implicit meaning in political tweets compared, for instance, to more traditional speeches has subsequently been confirmed by some empirical studies, including one of our papers published in 2019, which was a diametric comparison between political tweets and traditional speeches for several British and Italian politicians, but also more recently by some recent paper in press by Giorgia Mannaioli and Viviana Masia.
That's very interesting. So what about the teaching of this ability, competence, recognizing the implicit meaning of a text? So do you think that, did you experience teaching the recognition of implicit communication at school, and through which activities? I don't know. Who wants to answer?
I can start, and maybe David can integrate my question. And David, you can also show the material. David can also show the material we developed. Indeed, we also follow this question, and we would like to follow this question, documenting the opinion of experts, in this case, teachers. And we would like to document the opinion of teachers, and after have implemented the opinion, we would like to go again back in the classes and try these materials with students and make an evaluation with the results. But first of all, we don't still have the result with students. We just have an interview with teachers, and we ask to them if our material are fit to teach students the extraction of implicit meaning. And we propose true material taken out from our corpus from Twitter, and we selected some topic in order to be didacticized in English as foreign language lesson. And the topics were the election campaign, presidential campaign from Biden and Trump 4 years ago, and some tweets about climate deniers and reply of Greta Thunberg. And so we compose material based also on task-based language teaching. In this material, tweets were presented. Students have to classify tweets according to stating something or offending, according to the pragmatic function they had. And then they have to discover in this Twitter, so thank which expression some statement were, some expression were offending or not. So they will come out intuitively to the definition of what is implicit. And they cover that some offending tweets are not so explicit offending something, but they presuppose or they implicit an offending meaning. And yeah, and we give this, maybe I would like to give the result later. Maybe David can integrate my the construction of material, and afterward we could say what the teacher said about this material.
Davide?
I can unmute you.
I cannot because I see your, I see Davide's screen.
Okay, now I'm
Yeah,
fine. Just
okay.
thank you, Nicole. I would like just to present very briefly the materials that you have an idea or what we actually did with our teachers. As Nicola mentioned before, we didn't address specifically the students, but this time we conducted a small scale survey, an evaluation made by teachers. And so you can see here, this is the outline of a question in which students are supposed to read some materials, in this case, tweets, and recognize implicit meaning with the support of teachers through various tasks, to various activities. So one of these activities, in this case, you can see in the picture, is a preliminary one in which students familiarize with the medium, with a genre. So in this case, tweets about climate change deniers. And their first task is to divide these two tweets into columns, into groups, depending if this material express an argumentation, present an argumentation, or just insults. And then we have a second group of material task. In this case, probably you can see here the second picture, here number 13. This is a group activity that takes place after the first preliminary one. In this case, this is a group activity, so the students work together and they're asked to be a little bit more proactive in the sense that they have to answer this question, and they have to address this possible scenario in which a friend of theirs is running for school representative, but then she receives a sort of threatening message with some implicit meaning conveyed through it. And then they have to answer to address this situation by just providing short text. And then we have what we can consider the core of our activity, which is the one that you see right now in figure 3. I hope it's big enough, but I can just make it a little bit bigger, just like that. I hope it helps.
Yes.
It's okay, we can see.
Enough.
Okay, perfect. So in this case, this is right a way in which student can apply the ICE technique that Nicola mentioned before. So this implicit extraction from the text, which is something that was actually pioneered by Marina Sbisa in some educational project that took place about 15, 20 years ago. So what happens here is that students have access to the raw data. So for instance, we can just have a look at the third message. Greta must work on her anger management problem, which was one of the tweets that we saw before. And they have to provide a sort of paraphrase. So they have just to interpret this message and try to make it as much explicit as possible. So in this case, we have obviously a definite description, and one possible paraphrase would be something like Greta has an anger management problem. In gray, the text in gray is actually meant only for teachers, and it's sort of help just to make the reconstruction of implicit meaning more feasible, and also for teachers to help students with this task that can be actually daunting for students in the beginning. So this is more or less our just a brief survey on our materials and our intended task. And I would like to give the floor to Nicola to talk a little bit about the results of this experience with teachers.
We interviewed 10 teachers, 5 from Italy and 5 from Austria, according to yes, an interview guideline, and we ask how they would implement this exercises and unit. And in general, we got the impression that the teacher appreciate the aim and the technique of this material. However, their perceptions of ICE effectiveness vary widely based on their prior knowledge about pragmatic. Many teachers really didn't understand the importance of extracting implicit meaning, but for the most of them was really important. However, too difficult for the student. The difficulties for the students were just in part because students don't have enough grammatical, syntactical, lexical knowledge to be confronting with such authentic material, but especially because students don't have the background information deep enough, like they don't know the political context in US. So the suggestion many teachers come out was to anticipate some material we also include in our original material. And we use just in the end to explicitly reflect on implicit. And this material to be anticipated were dealing with advertisement. I can show in my screen. So like here, you saw something? You seen something? Oh.
No, we see your face.
Screen. Yeah, no, no, sorry. It's here, material, sorry. I forgot to open before. So essentially we propose some advertisement. Yes, here. And in this advertisement, sorry, it's maybe too small. Here in the end, there were messages. Sorry, I tried to make it bigger.
But it's okay, but you didn't share the screen, so we cannot see.
Oh, sorry. So now you see, but it's too small. Yes, now it's maybe big enough, isn't it?
We see your screen, Nicole, not the file.
Sorry.
Not the file.
Okay, sorry, again.
And again, your screen, but not the file.
Again, it's not working. Okay, but
you can open the file and then to share it.
Yeah, sorry. So because we run out of time, I just say the point, okay? So the point is some teachers were afraid that this material cannot be comprehended by all students because the background information were missing. And they said, we would like to have such material, but please anticipate this material with basic examples taken out of well-known context, also in the L1, like advertisement. And another important conclusion that many teachers believe that they already make text analysis when they tackle literature, lyrics, and they extract in lyrics, poem, and so on, already implicit meaning. However, we think that it's not enough. It's, of course, a good exercise and a good competence to afford also the online challenges of communication, but to direct tackle the topic of message that they are confronted with, so students are confronted with in social network, will be a more straightforward strategy to provide more critical digital literacy, provide students with a critical digital literacy.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Nicola and Davide. I have a big question. Probably I can ask you this last question, and then we can give the floor to the audience. If I don't know if there are any questions from people who are attending this this seminar. In any case, okay, you talked about the reaction of teachers to this specific task, but my question is more general. So, how are education actors in general responding to the challenge launched by the critical digital literacy, and how can we imagine a large education community that promotes critical digital literacy in general and democratic linguistic education in particular these days?
It's a very complex question. We can answer both from our research, literature research, and from empirical interview from teachers. The first point, you can see a lot of literature about literacy, digital literacy provided by a major institution like a European Commission. For example, the DG Comp, which provide a general, which aim is to general increase and develop the digital literacy of the citizen. However, such document are mostly meet the happiness and the favor of a measure of informatic like Google and Microsoft, but they don't really address such a problem. Except, to be honest, in the last version of the DGComp, the edit in 2022, which also tackle some critical point like the digital divide, ethical issue in ET, and notably democratic implication of digital technologies. However, the teachers we have the pleasure to interview were really sensible about critical topic. Indeed, in schools, there is a lot of efforts to provide students, new citizens with the middle to them to assess also, I would think, to digital debate in some way. And schools reply in different way. For example, in my experience in Austria, there is from this year a new mandatory subject called basic digital education. However, this digital education is mostly focused on informatic competence rather than humanistic competence to assess to information online. And also what we know also from experience of our interview teacher, in Italy, educazione civica, so like civic education, also tackle topic like debate online or cyber mobbing. Still, there are a lot of interest. We also saw a lot of interest by our teachers, were English teachers. So they never of our 10 teachers said, oh, it's not by business. They all said, oh, it's very interesting. I would like to try your material with my students. And mostly they did. And so what do you think is what we also can do as a teacher's educator and as a researcher in the academy to go out from the university and try to connect ourselves and not only stay in the academic network, but also try to be more connected with the teachers in schools, offer them dialogue and workshop where we can each from each other's, learn from each other's, and also get more empirical results from students to really know if the material we proposed are really effective. And if they are effective, then go ahead, go to some institution to provide new syllabi and also new learning material for books in schools.
Thank you very much. I don't know if Viviana or Davide want to add something.
Yeah, well, it must be said that there is also the opportunity for many Italian universities to organize what are generally known as PCTO, so percorsi per le competenze trasversali, so soft skills and orientation for students that are, it's a compulsory course that they have, well, actually a compulsory activity. They can either choose to do some work-like activity or attend these university courses, which are usually on different topics. And for example, it's 2 years that we have tried to deliver course precisely on detection of implicit information. So last year we tried this for the first time with Edoardo and Giulia Giunta, and it was kind of a success. So basically, high school students are much more interested in this kind of stuff than one might expect, especially because they do this after school. I haven't tested Nicola's materials, but I just had them acquire some background knowledge and then work themselves on commercial ads or public speeches or whatever. And the progress is tangible, I would say. So there is a way to work on teachers, but also to work on students. And it would also be a good thing to spread the perspective of using these courses. So I would say advertising these kinds of activities, these initiatives just to make the knowledge about manipulative implicit communication go out from outside from the academic premises. So that would be a good thing to take into account, especially for university teachers, professors, sorry. That would be a good initiative to extend to high school students before they come of age. This is another important thing. So before they acquire the ability to express their vote preferences.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So do we have any questions from the other participants from the audience? So let me take advantage of this interruption just to thank Ruth Webb, the director of our lab, to be with us tonight. Thank you very much, Ruth. And Edoardo, a lever la main. Edoardo.
Yes, do you hear me?
We can.
Yes.
Do you hear me? Okay, because I have a microphone. I'm not sure it works. Okay. Well, first of all, thank you all. Thanks, Paola, for organizing. Thanks, Nicola, Viviana, and Davide for proposing their contents. I found your materials really perfect. I think the examples you showed of the one with the attacks to Greta, the one of the colleague candidating for a role, and the examples of explicitation a la Sbisa, they're all perfect. I agree that probably in some cases students may lack the necessary background. And so I think that's not a drawback in your examples. Obviously, one has to tune materials with the attendees' backgrounds. And in this sense, I agree with the hint you made, probably Nicola or Davide, that perhaps it was suggested by some teacher, I don't know, but I think that commercial advertisings, although they do not address political issues, are a very good training, are exactly as good as political examples, because the mechanism is always there. And by definition, the background is there, because no ad can pay the cost of having a wrong tune with the addresses. So advertising stemming from the same environment of the students will always be good, even if political aspects are not touched. As a first step, I think it's okay, because the mechanism is the same. And I would say someone who got the advertising vaccine will be able to resist the political disease in a way. So I think what you did is already okay. And that's it. Then I was curious about something that was asked by Paula about measuring, because actually Davide gave a very articulated answer. Measuring, I mean, the amount of implicit in a text, which also has obviously teaching consequences, because being able to say this politician is more implicit, is trying to cheat on you more than this other, can activate the libido of the students. That is, they will see that they will have an instrument by which they can tell other students, other people, you see, my politician is better than yours, things like that. So there is a collateral advantage. So measuring, Davide told us what you did, how can I say, after having developed the criteria for measuring the amount. So what you actively did in your research group. But I'm curious because obviously Viviana and I have proposed in 2014 in the paper in the Journal of Pragmatics a measuring method, and then we have applied it extensively on the impacts corpus. You all know about that. And that's a possibility, but of course, although we have worked so much on that, we know perfectly that it's imperfect for the reasons that Davide told us.
I should have mentioned this, Eduardo, but we were running out of time, so I didn't want to add
so actually, I don't want everyone to run out of time, because my question is, have you added something to our model, or are you more or less using the same model? So I don't know if I'm very curious. I'm very interested. Thanks.
No, we haven't added anything, because so we started working together. So Nicola, David, and I on Twitter, which is obviously a completely different type of text. And so, as you know, moving that grid to this text type would have not been so successful. So I think we should have devised a completely different taxonomy and completely different list of indexes, in my view. So we prefer to move in a different type of quantification method. While I think that, so our method, so the one published on the JFP is probably more suitable for traditional text, traditional speeches. That's it.
Especially for long texts.
For long text. Exactly. But also because we were not interested in the weight of implicit strategies, but just on the distribution throughout.
But are you saying that tweets do not allow quantification, or that tweets need a different way to quantify it? Because one principle, Yeah,
I
but
would say a different way.
For now, it's a different way, but
yeah,
you won't tell us which kind of way.
Yeah, since right? So our method, so the method on longer traditional speeches was to also assess the impact. So the weight that each implicit strategy has on the understanding of the message. But on Twitter, we basically worked on the distribution, on the frequency. So how frequent some implicit strategies were, also in association with specific content types. So basically our type of quantification was mainly frequency based. I would say, I don't know if David or Nicola want to add something to this characterization, but I think it's pretty much
yes.
like this.
Just for something, I would say that, just deep down, the method is the same, just for traditional speeches and for tweets. The only thing, of course, is that in tweets, as I mentioned before, most of the time there is no context, or the context is very, very minimal. So in this sense, the interpretation process, the inferential process also required by the researchers is extended, so to speak. But in principle, yes, what Viviana said is absolutely true.
And I would like something very practical. So teachers had some difficulty sometime when the answer is not clear. So they would prefer to have a solution, an easy solution for the ICE, which is not always possible. However, many teachers also open to holistic evaluation and to measure, not to measure right or false, but to measure the general critical awareness of students. However, we of course should offer also a way how to measure this competence. And I think it was next step when we'll be able to go in a class to measure if our material is really efficient or not. And then in this case, we should really come out with a test which measure how our material are be able to change the ability by students and make they able to understand implicit content.
Thank you very much. So, are there any other questions? And we just thanks our speakers.
Sorry, if there are no other questions, since Nicola was raising an interesting issue, I think my experience, because we have tried, as Viviana mentioned, to export this knowledge to Italian teachers, for instance, with Rete per la Didattica Integrata, that is mainly based in Lombardia, but also in the rest of Italy. A typical standpoint of teachers is, please give me something that will not generate more labor. So something that really offers solutions, not further problems. And this has much to do with what you were saying. They want an easy solution. They want a mechanical method that can be applied without further ado, without further effort. So I think you're completely right. With teachers, you need to find something that, even if perhaps scientifically less appropriate, is better because it doesn't raise additional effort to them. This is typical for Italian teachers, at least, because we know how they are condemned to live by our government.
I mean, I don't think it's typically Italian, but in any case, probably otherwise, the other option would be just to go back to the idea that was originally put forward by the GISHL of having a large community of educators, researchers, and teachers who shift the role at any time. So we can imagine a fora where at the same time, researchers, teachers, and students study together the material to be proposed, for example, to another level, to other level students or some creative stuff like that. What you said, Eduardo, is true. There is a political consideration that is in order. The school in the 70s is not the school we are living now, where the time to try this kind of experimentation is much reduced. And probably we need a ready-made solution to educate people, which is not always probably possible, especially
No, but you are
when
right.
you face this complexity.
You are right. Perhaps the community of teachers and researchers is a dream, but just to quote someone very renowned, we have a dream.
Okay. That's enough. So I think that on this optimistic point, we can thank again our speakers and our participants, Eduardo, Ruth, Rossana, who also worked with teachers, and our students. So the next meeting for this cycle, or I should probably switch to French pour annoncer que nous aurons les 21 mai Malvina Nissim qui nous parlera des aspects éthiques de l'intelligence artificielle. Et quelques jours après, plus tard, nous aurons Emmanuel Tamblon, Lucie Dunker et Emmanuel Efad qui nous parleront de rhétorique en ligne et rhétorique comme instrument de persuasion. Ça sera le 24 mai. Encore une fois, j'invite Eduardo, Rossana et bon, les personnes qui ont collaboré ou qui veulent collaborer avec notre observatoire à proposer également leurs nouveaux sujets de recherche parce que pour nous, c'est vraiment toujours un plaisir de pouvoir discuter avec vous. Donc, merci encore à tout le monde. Et moi, j'arrête en ce moment-là le direct Facebook. Et si vous voulez rester pour échanger quelques mots, ça sera avec plaisir. Merci à tout le monde. Donc, la diffusion en direct.